Okay, so good afternoon. My name's Lucas Whittaker. I'm a third year PhD student. So today I'm just presenting the results of my second study, which undertook a systematic literature review on deepfakes. So what is a deepfake? Deepfakes are a form of what we call synthetic media. This is media which is both artificially and automatically generated. So this here is an example. So we've got the original actor who was filmed on the left-hand side, and deepfakes generated from input data of these three individuals at the bottom on the right-hand side. It's kind of creepy. So deepfakes are being used within marketing. So this is an example of one which is used in a political marketing campaign during the US presidential election. So hopefully the sound plays.
I don't have to do anything. You're doing it to yourselves. People are divided. Your voting districts are manipulated. Voting locations are closing soon. Millions can't vote. Is it not hard for democracy to collapse? All you have to do is nothing.
Kind of creepy. Okay, so the deepfake literature itself is still highly emergent. There is a lack of conceptual discussion, and marketers are yet to consider the effect of deepfakes on customers and organizations. So we undertook a systematic literature review to explore emerging perspectives. So there are a variety of deepfake definitions in the literature, and they are inconsistent, and some do have negative connotations. So for example, we look at social sciences, they might define deepfakes as being deceptive media or tools for violating consent. Whereas we look at computer science, they're more focused on the more computational aspects about defining deepfakes. So there's yet to be really a deepfake definition which incorporates these multidisciplinary perspectives and acts to also disentangle those negative connotations associated with deepfakes. So this leads to the first RQ: how have deepfakes been defined and conceptualized across disciplines? So the literature has identified who creates deepfakes and who are targeted by them. So for example, examples of creators, they can just be social media content creators like YouTube channels, regular consumers using consumer-grade deepfake apps, and even brands. Those depicted by deepfake can be regular people, politicians, celebrities, even historical figures reanimated and appear in educational content. So though these parties have been identified, there's yet to be, again, a multidisciplinary survey of these different actors. So we dispose of the question, who creates deepfakes and who is depicted within them? So we propose that deepfakes can potentially be used to create and destroy perceived values for both customers and organizations via consumption's value theory. So this says that there are 4 different value dimensions. So for example, functional value, the fact that deepfakes could potentially make tasks easier and provide practical and financial benefits. There's social value, deepfake providing a sense of identification and helping to achieve wider social goals. Emotional value, it providing enjoyment and pleasure. And epistemic value, it's used to provide knowledge or satiate curiosity. At the same time, value can also be destroyed. So for example, if you look at emotional value would be destroyed if the deepfake evokes some sort of negative reaction or disgust or something like that. So studies haven't yet again determined whether deepfakes can create these positive or negative value outcomes. So this poses the question, what are the value outcomes of deepfakes for customers and organizations? So lastly, the deepfake literature suggests there are various psychological mechanisms which could be leveraged which may influence how consumers or people perceive deepfake messages. So factors such as cognitive ability, dual processing theory, cognitive biases also have been suggested. Again, the literature hasn't yet conducted a survey of these psychological factors. This poses the question, what are the psychological factors which may influence perceptions of deepfakes? So very briefly, the method. So we use deepfake as a keyword in the systematic review, looked in 5 mostly multidisciplinary databases between the date ranges of 2017 and 2021, and looking at just Q1 and Q2 journals. So we had over 13,000 results returned, and we ended up, after screening, with 80 articles which were included in the review. So the first RQ, we input 76 definitions from those articles into Leximancer, which identified 77 key concepts. Those were videos, audio, realistic, fake, artificial, learning, media, and saying. That's 8 key concepts. Cool. So from those concepts, we generate the following definition. The fact that deepfakes are synthetic media generated using artificial intelligence and deep learning technology, which produces realistic depictions of persons undertaking actions or saying words which are fake, taking the form of video, image, or audio content. So RQ2, so who creates deepfake aspect of RQ2. So there were 7 main themes of creation actors. So the first theme, creation, undetermined creators were most commonly identified, ironically. So either those who the text did not identify or who were purposely anonymous. Next, there were individual content creators, such as social media users and hobbyists. Then there were more transformative actors, such as social causes, researchers, and educators. And then there were commercial actors, such as media organizations and advertisers. Then political or military actors, such as governments, both foreign and domestic. Next, there were internet communities, such as subreddits and websites. And lastly, there were also cyber criminals, such as regular criminals or also terrorist groups. So who was depicted? So frequent categories include, probably unsurprisingly, public figures and celebrities, most commonly. Then there were politicians, government officials, citizens and individuals, and company figureheads and executives. So these results indicate that anyone can be deepfaked, whether they have public or private lives, either consensually or not. So RQ3, looking at those value outcomes. So on the positive value outcome side, so of customers, deepfakes were interpreted to create potentially epistemic and functional value most frequently. So looking at epistemic value, so for example, being exposed to a deepfake which, for example, resurrects a historical figure in an educational medium. Then there's functional value. So for example, seeing a preoperative visualization of medical procedures such as breast augmentation and having that deepfake actually placed on their body so they can see that realistic depiction on themselves. In relation to organizations, so deepfakes can potentially create functional and epistemic value. So looking at functional value, actually being able to fix misspoken lines in movie scripts and movies without having to re-record footage, for example. And epistemic value, actually using deepfakes themselves to create public service announcements about the dangers of deepfakes. Ironically. So looking at the negative value aspects, so for customers, this was identified as epistemic and a blend of emotional epistemic. So looking at epistemic, so being exposed to disinformation or negatively orientated information. The emotional epistemic blend, that's similar. So for example, exposure to a deepfake of a politician who was misrepresented, which then leads to public outrage or shock. And now looking to organizations, so most commonly, potentially epistemic value can be destroyed. So if a politician was maliciously impersonated or depicted engaging in criminal behavior, and the functional epistemic blend. So for example, a financial loss could actually be incurred from a deepfake impersonating an executive, which actually did happen. It was something like $300,000 was lost because someone impersonated the CEO on a call, and the chief financial officer transferred the money thinking it was the CEO. So yeah, kind of freaky. All right, so the last RQ. I'm still generating results for this RQ, so I'll just summarize the cognitive bias aspects given the audience. So I categorized the biases cited in the retrieved articles into 4 categories based on the Cognitive Bias Codex. So biases which help us deal with informational overload were most commonly cited, such as confirmation biases, selective exposure, and realism heuristics. So these results suggest that deepfakes might be able to more effectively utilize cognitive biases present in individuals when they see deepfakes in information-rich environments, such as social media. So contributions really quickly. So developed a synthesized deepfake definition, systematically identify those actors who create and are depicted by deepfakes, use a new conceptual lens of value to define the impact of deepfakes on customers and organizations, use a multidisciplinary approach to evaluating potential psychological mechanisms. So one primary practical contribution, which is really interesting, is the fact that we suggest that marketers can integrate deepfakes into marketing strategy to create value, but we also emphasize the fact that value can also be destroyed, meaning there should be strategies in place to prepare for potential value destruction. Thanks very much.